All right, welcome back to my channel. All right, so this is part two of save and loading. So we're gonna call this one loading because that's what we're doing. All right, so first things first, you're gonna notice in some of my code here that I switched from uint 8 to int 16. I underestimated just how small a uint 8 is. So if you're following along, save yourself a headache and know that a uint 8 only goes up to something like 255. So if you're trying to save that into slice y saved, which goes from like 100 to 1100, it won't be enough, and you won't know why the blocks are all stopping at a certain point and loading correctly everywhere else. The other thing I want to draw your attention that I didn't talk about in the saving thing, because I didn't know at the time, is apparently if you have a struct that you are using as a save, you have to mark each individual property as a U property. And the reason why that is interesting to me is because down in the actual body, let's go look at that over here. Um, TetraCube save game, not C++, Alt O. So the reason that surprised me is because I set it as a U property down here. So my array of the cube struct is itself a U property. But in order for the things to actually be saved and propagated from saving to loading and all that, each individual thing inside the struct needs to be marked as a U property. So very important. Do not forget that. If you take one thing away, don't forget U property. All right, so the rest of this stuff is trying to think of something that might be interesting here. Okay, yeah, so I changed some of the values. I think I was using floats before, but since I'm only using whole numbers to represent the Q and the tetraminnows, I changed that to an int 16. I figured that should be enough. It gives me plus and minus. It's not unsigned or anything like that. The other thing I didn't realize about C++ is that apparently there's not a way to check uh, if a variable is initialized or not. So you can set it equal to null pointer, but if it's not like an actual pointer itself, that's not really an option. Yeah, so I don't typically work in C++ other than in game development, but I have learned now that the reason why people return -1 so often in C++ things is because it's a way of knowing that the variable is uninitialized. So I'm setting that for the hold and the tetraminnow in play so that I can test against it when I actually load. The other things, I set a default to the saved active slice that you're in to 11 so that when you load in, you won't be at just like some random thing. But I do overwrite this. So if that's something I wanted to test, I just thought 11 would be a good value for that one. And then high score, and then the cleared lines. The difference here is obviously cleared lines is the number of cleared lines in the active game that you're playing, and the high score is the high score of across all your games. And that becomes a little more interesting a little bit later on. So let's hop back over here. Tetraminnow base. Yeah, I think this was just changing these from uint 8s to int 16s. Yeah, it did the same thing for slice y because it didn't need to be a float because I'm not doing any decimal points. So slice y could be int 16 too. The player board, this is where things get a little bit crazier. So, I had to forward declare the usave game, and I had to add, well, I changed from save async to should save synchronous because, especially on mobile, it's quite possible that someone might kill the app before an asynchronous save is complete. The other thing is that when you hit exit, I try to save asynchronously, and it does not finish saving before the app closes. So in that instance, I want it to save synchronously. So I'm just passing in a bool to actually, like, tell me what I'm trying to do here. And then I have some functions for loading. This one is just a little helper thing, but let's go. We'll get to that in the player board CPP. Oh yeah, so in the line scanner, I just changed the speed that it was scanning. On mobile, sometimes it was scanning too fast and it could not keep up with clearing the lines, so I just dropped it down 20%. That's all I really did there. And then block base, it was more just changing the types, but I also oh yeah, I was just changing types and all the things. All right, so back in Tetramiddle base, the man. So yeah, more just changing file or data types. Now things got kind of crazy over in a player board CPP. So the first thing is up here, for some reason I had this like just random player controller ref thing in there, so I removed that, and I removed initialize queue because now when we're loading, we're handling all that in there except for the line scanner. So then yeah, it's just the data type change. Yeah, this is probably better if I look at the actual code base itself. So 162 here. 162 on oh, my eyes. Okay, yeah. Control Z or G 162. Well, this is still part of begin play. All right. But so this is kind of interesting here. So when you're actually loading the game, you have the option to send an option string. And since I'm actually starting in a different level and then loading into the actual game, I had to make a change to the way that I was calling the new level. And I'm gonna have to. I thought I had that saved in this. Oh yeah, no, it was up here. Okay, so I had to change the blueprints. Yeah, this is gonna make it difficult to show. But the C++ is what's really important here. So I added a load button and a new game button. I got rid of the start button. Now it says new game. So when it's a new game, it just loads regularly. But if I hit the load button, it just loads whatever your last game is. And when I do that, instead of just uGameplay statics open level, I'm passing in options. F string B should load equals true. And so over here, to read that, you have to do, oh, that's not it. Should load is uGameplay statics parse option, and then you're getting this from the game mode. So I had to get world, get auth game mode, option string, B should load, and then it's setting this as an F string. So I created a bool, defaulted it to false, and if should load, that's an F string, remember, if it equals F string true, then should load is true. And then afterwards, I know should I load or should I load high scores only? and then initialize the queue and set the timer. So down in load high score only, all this is doing is it's just cutting out absolutely everything, except for it's still casting the default save to a U TetraCube save game, checking if it was successful, and then loading in the high score. Loaded cast, high score saved. But down in load, I'm loading way more stuff now. So I added a high score value, which did not exist before, and I also added it to the menus. But I showed all that in another video, how to create menus in C++. So I'm thinking that in like anything that I call a tutorial, I might just start making like smaller bite size instead of figuring it out for a project and then showing all the code for an increasingly large project. I think what I need to start doing is creating like little like test blocks of code in little test projects that are just one-off, like, oh, this is how you load and stuff, because I think that would make code more reusable for me, first of all, but it would be much easier to follow than this format that I'm doing now. Anyway, so in order to load, the first thing I'm doing is casting, just like up above, and then I'm setting the active slice Y, so everything is in loaded cast now, and I have that in active slice saved. Not a whole lot changed up here, up in the save async. The only thing is I just added more data, so like I added the queue now, so you can't just like, if you don't like the draw of the tetraminnows, you can't just close and reopen and have a different randomized bunch of tetraminnows in your queue. So I save the queue, I'm saving the hold and the tetraminnow in play, and then the high score and your number of cleared lines. All of that is all set. And I think I had to create this function to, or no, that already existed. That's how I was updating the UI. Now, this is where the should save synchronous comes in. All it is just a different way of calling it. And the only real difference in async is, one, it's asynchronous, obviously, but the other is it has this delegate that you can call, and this can do things like show a little loading thing in the corner or whatever. You can kind of handle anything that you need to in that delegate, whereas in the regular save game to slot, it's just the save game instance and the F string of what you're going to call it, and this is the player index. So you can have like multiple players all with a default save, but my game only has one player, so defaults to 0. Went through load high score only, and then down here in load, it's basically just the inverse. Once you have everything set up properly in TetraCube save game, it really just is that easy. It knows what to do. As long as you have the correct variable names, you can just load it. And so what's nice is the way I'm saving the blocks is just an integer, an int 16, and based on that, I can just load it or re-instance a new one the same way that I do up above with the tetraminnows. Which brings me to one more thing that I think I had somewhere else in here. No, but in order to give you the ability to spawn a tetraminnow either randomized or passed in, I created a new function called spawn new tetraminnow. You pass in the minnow type and if you should show the timer. The timer just being that little thing that hovers above, showing you how much time is left in the slice that you're working on. In the queue, I don't want those shown, so I had to put a little bool in there to take care of that. But this is all pretty much exactly the same as what it was before, only now I have this function init tetraminnow type and text visibility, whereas before I just kind of like had a bunch of repeated code here. T show timer equals false, all that kind of stuff. Now it's down here, set text visibility, and set the tetraminnow type. And this is just for saving and loading, just for information purposes. Then up when I am filling the queue, so let's do a find on spawn tetraminnow. Yeah, add tetraminnow to queue. All that code used to be in here, but now since I need the ability to spawn a tetraminnow of a type, now all that add tetraminnow to queue does is loops through, moves it up, the existing one up, just like it was before. If the minnow type, if you don't pass anything in, this is defaulted over in the constructor to be -1. So add tetraminnow to queue. Right here, that's defaulted to -1. Very important to remember that, or it just won't be instance. But this is how I test for an unset thing. So if it is -1, then I know I need to get a random one. And then spawn tetraminnow returns a pointer to the tetraminnow that it just created. And from there, I'm just inserting it the same way as I was before at position 0, so that it's first in, first out when you pop it off the queue. But I think that's about everything that there is for save and loading. I might do a shorter like save and load video probably on my next project. I'm gonna do more targeted tutorials. Some people have been downvoting my videos, and the only thing I can think of is that it's, I don't know, less of a tutorial and more of just kind of a devlog of like, well, this is how I did it. If you want to follow along, here's my code, blah, blah, blah. But I think I will like make regular tutorials that are informational, actionable, and more bite-sized. So that if you want to do a single thing like save and load, I'll create a tutorial for that. I mean, there's probably plenty of them out there, but it's good to have new ones show up with new versions. In any case, I'm going to end this one here. I'm going to end it with a little bit of gameplay so that you can see the new interface. So if I load game, this is a game I was playing before. I can hit menu. Menu actually saves synchronously, because if I don't, it changes levels too quickly. Oh yeah, and so you'll see it like kind of slide into place because it loops through and checks which ones are actually like active right now, and then it moves them, so you kind of catch that like right at the last second. But this is everything, and now I have a high score. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.